There's Scott Deitche. Do you wanna go right to him, Seth?
Yeah, I guess we might as well.
All
Or
right,
should I take a break real quick?
let's go right to him.
All right,
That way we get our time in before Charlie calls.
let's bring our guest on. Mr.
There
Scott
he is.
Deitche, author,
Hey guys,
expert in the all things mafia, mob related. How are you, my friend?
doing well. Sorry about the delay on.
No, you're fine. I assumed that you were taken by the mafia, held captive, and were actually able to get out in time to come on the show.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Scott, as you're well aware, man, we chatted with Michael Francis last week, and it got us completely sucked into the mob again.
Yeah.
You know, and we figured who better to talk to than you about the mob, and let's start with Francis
Yep.
because Francis, you know, I know you're aware of this. He asked me to do security for him on Saturday at his speaking engagement here in Cleveland. So my first question as a mob expert, is Saturday my last day on the planet?
No, not at all. He was one of the first guys really in in the late '80s to come out with that book, Quitting the Mob. He was one of the
Right.
first ones to kind of leave that. So we're talking 30 years out. So yeah, you're good. You're safe.
Did you happen to watch the whole interview that we did with Francis?
I caught part of it. I do need to, and I will put it up on some of my socials as well. But I appreciate you asking the questions on there. That was really good.
Sure. Well, did you think that my question is, as somebody that knows this stuff inside and out, did we do a good job or did we come off as novices? Because I didn't know, I had no idea how to lead into him.
No, I think it came off great. And plus, you guys like that stuff anyway, so you have probably more of a passing interest than most people. So yeah, I think it came out great.
See, now one of the things that I wanted to ask him, and I thought it would be too novice to ask him, is about these movies like the Goodfellas and the Godfathers and all that kind of stuff, to see if he actually thought that kind of stuff related to the actual mob life. I mean, would that have been a dumb question, or are these movies for real, or are they not?
No, that would have been a good question. And I think he did something maybe for Esquire a few years ago where he looked at like a few of those movies and kind of gave his thoughts on it. But no, there's some of those movies, especially the ones like Donnie Brasco that are based on real life incidents. Yeah, sure, some of it's going to be a little bit Hollywooded up, but a lot of them, especially the ones based on true stories, kind of stick close to the facts and kind of give at least a pretty good feel of what it's like. Certainly from my conversations with other wise guys over the years.
Have you watched any that that you've researched? Because you've done a ton of research for your books and obviously for the documentaries that you're featured in. Have you watched any of the movies where you were just like, this is blatantly wrong, none of this happened?
Well, I mentioned Donnie Brasco. So in the movie Donnie Brasco, which is a great movie, Al Pacino, Johnny Depp, Michael Madsen, Bruno Kirby's in it. But there's a whole section of that movie that takes place in Florida. And in the movie, it all takes place kind of in Miami, South Florida, where they meet Santo Trafficante. In reality, it took place outside of Tampa. And they kind of intimate in the movie that Trafficante was involved with kind of keeping them out of Florida. But in reality, the FBI set up this elaborate sting operation. So it was a little, again, kind of Hollywood, a glamorization of the storyline. So it wasn't a wholly accurate, but just because I had that Tampa background, I was like, oh man, you're so close to getting it right.
Well, speaking of the Tampa thing, talk a little bit about your ties to Tampa and because I'm sure we have a lot of people here in Cleveland that go to Florida for vacations, and you offer what I think has got to be the coolest tour that you can go to. That's not going to cost you $6,000, and a pair of mouse ears to go see. That being, your Tampa Mafia Tour. So talk a little bit about that, man.
Yeah, we've been doing it now well over a decade, maybe 13, 14 years. So we run them primarily from September to May, kind of, off what you would probably run them in Cleveland, where you would run them in the summer, but it's just too damn hot to walk around outside during the day. And it's a tour through Ybor City, which is a historic neighborhood in Tampa, which was largely Cuban, Spanish, Italian, small German and Romanian Jewish population, kind of a really interesting ethnic community that was founded by the cigar industry. And that's kind of the neighborhood where some of the organized crime developed. And because it's a historic district, a lot of the old buildings are still around, not all of them, but a lot. And it's a nice, about a mile loop walking tour that we do. And yeah, we do them from September to May. We do Saturday ones, we do a happy hour one, and people really still seem to enjoy it.
Right on. Well, Scott, with the tour itself, when you take people around, especially for 13 years of doing it, I'm sure you get the same questions over and over again. How do you keep it fresh for yourself? I know you try to keep it fresh for the new people that are going through it for the first time. But let's be honest, if you're doing the same thing the same time over and over for 13 years, that's awfully, awfully difficult. How do you keep it fresh for yourself? Are you still like investigating and finding new little nooks and crannies of that story?
Yeah, that's exactly how I do it. I have a set, there's a few set spots that you have to go to all the time. And then we have different spots or news stories in different areas that will kind of exchange in and out. Sometimes by necessity, if part of the tour, like if there's an event in Ybor and I can't get to a certain area, I have, backup spots. So I always kind of shift it around, but even at the spots I go to, I'm constantly digging back like through old newspapers. Oh, there was a raid of illegal gambling raid here in 1933. I can add that into the story and take something out. So yeah, it's, you're going to have to play the classics, to use kind of a metal parlance,
right.
That everyone wants to hear, but you throw in some deep cuts every so often. And I do get repeat customers. So people that haven't, come a couple of years later and they'll be like, oh, I don't remember this spot. So that kind of keeps it fresh.
How did you become like an authority on this topic? How did you get into the mob and mafia and all that?
So I grew up in New Jersey, hence the general interest in the topic. And back in the early 90s, I just started reading whatever mob books were out there. So like Wise Guy by Nick Pileggi, the Westies, T.J. English, some of the old Hank Messick books. George Anastasia was starting to come out with some of his Philadelphia mob books. And then I met a gentleman online in like 95 when there was literally not much at all online, but there was a guy that had a mafia website, and I started corresponding with this historian in England, and I had moved to the Tampa Bay area at that point. He said, hey, have you ever heard of the Tampa Mafia? Do you know anything about them? I was like, not really. So he sent me copies of these congressional hearings from 1950, and there's great stories of like gangland killings and illegal gambling, all the juicy stuff you like in a mob story. And that kind of was like, oh, maybe I'll write a book about this. So that kind of started it. My first book came out in 2004, and yeah, it's been kind of a whirlwind since then in terms of, coming out with books. I had the tour, doing stuff like this. And yeah, so it's been interesting and fun. And before I forget, you mentioned Cleveland before. I did want to say that there definitely are some Cleveland ties in Florida. The Cleveland mob were active, probably more so kind of in the Miami, Fort Lauderdale area, but there were a lot of guys from Ohio in general that came down and were active down here in Florida for a while.
Right on. And it's fun. I was watching, because I'm just obsessed with the mob again this week, because if I get asked a question or something on Saturday, I want to make sure I know the answer.
Yeah.
It's really that simple. But yeah. So this afternoon I was watching Kill the Irishman, which is obviously the Danny Green thing. And I went to Google, and I saw that literally recently that Danny Green's wife just passed away, that she was like 95, that Nancy Hegler or Nancy Green just passed away. I'm curious in your, passings and dealings, if you ever heard whatever became of her. And the reason I'm asking that is because she seemed like she was a very important person to his life, and but it didn't seem like anybody ever actively targeted her, even to make a statement to him to back off. And I was just curious if she was somehow protected, or if she was a total innocent and the mob just knew it and left her alone, or what.
Well, generally from the mob perspective, they don't go after wives or kids or, families, even if she was tangentially involved. And there have been many cases about wives or girlfriends being kind of tangentially involved. I'd be a little bit more surprised that law enforcement didn't go after her, because the FBI in the past has done the, hey, we're going to arrest your wife and kind of pressure you kind of thing. So, but yeah, generally from the mob perspective, they rarely, if ever, knowingly target family members or innocent bystanders, if you will.
What really destroyed the mafia? I mean, was it drugs? Was it the fact that they started getting into stuff like that? What kind of killed off the main mafia scene?
Yeah. The RICO Act, law enforcement played a really, really big part in dismantling organized crime's hold. Some families like Denver or St. Louis, so even though there was law enforcement, it also, they were smaller families. They just kind of faded away over time. But law enforcement, I think if you had to really winnow it down, because now guys were facing 50, 60-year prison sentences. So, what are they going to do? They're going to become witnesses. And that kind of gets that domino effect going through. And also now, if you're a mobster, illegal gambling, hey, gambling's legal everywhere.
Yeah.
Drugs, marijuana's, their unions aren't as big as they were. So I think a lot of those traditional rackets have kind of dried up or become legal.
Do you think that it would have, and I'll quote, the famous quote from The Godfather, which Seth will not know anything about since he's never
I got
seen
the shirt.
movie. Never seen the movie.
My God.
That's,
Got the shirt.
That's not even American.
Jesus.
But the famous scene in The Godfather, where Vito turns down what's his name, Sollozzo, because he doesn't want to get involved into the drugs, into the drug business. Do you think that if the mob as a whole would have stuck to that line, which I know I'm comparing a movie to real life, but if they would have stuck to that line and stayed out of drugs and just stayed more with gambling and women and numbers and stuff like that, do you think that we may never have even seen the proliferation of RICO because the government was okay to look away from that?
No, and kind of going out on a theory limb here. Well, first of all, the mafia has been involved in drugs since the very beginning. So
okay,
the mafia was involved in drugs all the way back pre-prohibition era, and certainly post-prohibition really started to open up routes for narcotics to enter the U.S. And the mafia were there from the beginning. Now, some mafia families later on, kind of as RICO and other laws and law enforcement started paying attention, started trying to steer members away from that. But really, I think the mafia got so big, it was hard for law enforcement to not notice, in terms of infiltration of labor unions, infiltration of legitimate businesses. So, I mean, drugs did play a part, but the mafia were so heavily involved in drugs from the beginning. In fact, before the FBI even investigated the mafia, the Bureau of Narcotics had voluminous files on major mafia figures around the U.S.
Do you think that the government kind of took cues from the mafia and kind of wanted them shut down so the government could actually start the rackets that they're doing today? And maybe that's why they wanted the mafia gone, so they could start being the mafia?
Well,
did we freeze?
did you guys?
There you are.
Yeah, you froze for a second. Can you hear me? Yeah, there we go.
Yep.
Sorry. Well, I mean, the government hired the mafia to help them kill Fidel Castro in the early '60s. So I think I think they viewed it as maybe in certain segments a partnership.
Right. Will you write a book about the new mafia family known as the Bidens?
I don't want to get into politics. I'm probably on the other side of the coin for India politically, but I don't have a problem with exposing anybody for anyone. If you look at the long history of political corruption, there's certainly been plenty of stuff from both sides of the aisle. To
I definitely agree with that.
Yeah. I mean, the political corruption aspect is another reason I think that the mafia were able to, get so entrenched. If you look at, I mean, all the way up in some instances. So.
Right on. Well, Scott, we haven't really talked about. We talked about your tours, but the other thing that we should definitely plug are your books. I have several of them, which are great. I personally am a fan of this one the most, the Hitmen, the Purple Gang one, but I also like the Silent Dawn as well. So talk a little bit about your books and where people should go to get the books and keep up with you and all that stuff.
Yeah, so I've kind of brought all my stuff under one website. It's easy, tampamafia.com. You can find information about the tours there. We have some stories up online, some stuff I've written over the years for local magazines and my website. You can find that information on my books, links to purchase them, and other links to find out other things that I'm doing. Usually, some of the stuff I've done with you guys in the past, I've posted up on the video section with links. So yeah, tampamafia.com, the easiest way to find out, and you can reach me that way as well.
Very good.
Tampamafia.com.
That's right.
Yep. All right. Super easy.
All right. Well, Scott, this has been fun, man. What are we missing that you want people to know before we check out here? That it's 2023 and we're still talking about the mafia and they're still active. So it's a never-ending source of fascination for people, and it's great for me. As long as people keep interested in it, I'll keep writing books.
I'll tell you what, I'm super excited, one, to pick up one of your books, because I don't have them yet, but also this coming Saturday for us to go see Michael Francese. I see a different pronunciation everywhere I go, but I just love hearing the stories. I think it's a hell of a lifestyle that's glorified now, but maybe shouldn't be glorified when it comes down to it. But it definitely is fascinating. I think that's what it is with people. It's like watching something that we could never experience, and it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, that should be great. And Chris, I mentioned to you that he's, I talked to this guy. They're thinking about maybe doing something in Florida as well. So yeah, I think you guys will have a great time.
Can't wait. And hopefully I'll still be around Monday to tell all about it.
Well, are you going to have to wear like a suit, with a black shirt, the white tie? And
you know what? I have not heard from their guy yet, but I'm prepared to go either mob suit or tracksuit. If I could go Sopranos mode and go all tracksuit as well. So
that'd be great.
See, I want to see Chris underneath my car checking for bombs and everything else before we go in. So I'm looking forward to it. So
nice,
good. But thank you, Scott, for joining us tonight. Much appreciated, man.
All right, thanks, guys. Always a pleasure.
Thank you. All right. Scott Deitche, fantastic, good stuff. TampaMafia.com.
Yeah, right. He's great. He's great, and we didn't even touch on it with Scott, but for any of you that watch documentaries about the mob, he's in damn near every one of them. Like he's a really, really, like, he's one of those guys that anytime anybody does anything on the mob, he gets that call. So he's easily in 30 or 40 documentaries.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to just sit my entire life, the rest of the week, watching mafia documentaries, movies, and everything else.
Yeah, you better be ready.
You
already failed the test once. They might not let you in the door.
We have backstage all access passes for Saturday night, the 24th, 7 p.m. Lorraine Palace Theater, and I don't want to be questioned by the man himself. And
what if they ask you? I don't think you could answer the same question they asked you the first time, even though we've gone over the answers.
Yeah, I forgot even what question it was already. So
it was who were the 5 guys killed at the end of The Godfather?
Yeah,
and you can't name one, can you?
Absolutely, I can. Tony, rigatoni, spaghetti, and sauce.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to it, though. We're going to have a good time.
Wait.
All right, from one mafia to another, we're going to talk about the Lakewood City Council here.
That's a real mob.
Yeah, that's a real mob. You want to talk about people screwing people over? We're going to talk about that with one of our great friends, Charlie Kalani, in about 2 minutes. All right?
All right.
Hang on.